In the meantime, we're going to bring up our next guest, Elizabeth Holmes from Theranos, and she's going to be speaking with Jon Shieber. So please give her a warm welcome.
All right, I'll call. Thanks. Hey, everybody. I'm Jon Shieber. The woman who I will be interviewing needs no introduction. She is Elizabeth Holmes. I'll introduce her anyway, and I think Jordan already did. We're going to have a first here for a TechCrunch Disrupt event in which I will get my blood drawn live on stage right now, so y'all can all see what the Theranos process looks like. I believe we have a licensed phlebotomist who is about to come out and take my blood. If there is anyone here who is squeamish, I would urge you to look away while the magic happens. If the magic happens. Can you come on out and we'll get this taken care of. So move that up here. Get that right there. And I'm sorry for this. We'll get to the meat of the interview in a couple of seconds. So what does this entail? All right. There are vials that are coming out for those of you who can't see what's happening. Now, in a traditional process, as I'm sure we all know, I would be rolling up my sleeve, people would be tapping my veins, there would be all sorts of process, and there would be a big, big needle. This involves no needle, but a little blood, sort of warming packet that I'm getting. And I'm sorry I'm giving you the play-by-play, but this seems to be the best way to go about it. Elizabeth, how many times have you had this done to you?
Probably tens of thousands at this one.
Tens of thousands of times.
All the time. Yeah.
So when was the first time you did it? And I understand from the Fortune interview that you were a little squeamish about blood yourself. So you might be the first hemophobe to start a billion-dollar blood business or multi-billion-dollar blood business. What was the first time like for you? How did you prep for it mentally?
Well, you're exactly right. Needles is the only thing I've ever been really scared of, and so I figured the first time I did it, I had to do it in front of a group of clients and investors, so that way, no matter what, it would look painless because I'd have to make it be painless, and I did. And it's psychological. Once you do, a stick the first time, you learn it doesn't hurt. And exactly what you're doing here is the process we've developed to replace traditional phlebotomy, or the process of getting big tubes of blood from the arm, with these tiny nanotainers, which you'll see, which collect just a few drops.
Okay, we're all ready. We're all set. Things are happening. I'm about to get poked. We'll see what happens. We'll see how much pain I'm in.
The big test is whether you think it's painless.
Right, exactly. Oh, good God! No, it hasn't started yet. So there we go. And there it is. That's it. It was done. Quick and painless.
There you go.
I've had more pain preparing for this interview than I've had getting my blood drawn right now.
Yeah.
So there we go. I appreciate it. You were in stealth mode for 11 years.
Yep.
How did no one leak? Like, how did no word get out about what y'all were doing? And how did you retain talent over the course of that period of time while you're doing all this development, and you can't say anything about it?
Yeah. Well, we had a lot of work to do. This is a very big mission and a very big goal. And so we wanted to build out the solution before we talked about it. And exactly as a result, we didn't have a website that said anything. And the clients we did have were under non-disclosure, so we didn't have to talk about what we were working on before we'd finished it. So for about 10 years, there was no press release, there was nothing in the media.
Yeah.
And last fall, when we reached a point in which we could begin to make this infrastructure accessible to individuals and clinicians directly, we did begin to talk about it, but it was very simple. You just don't talk about it.
The first rule of Theranos is don't talk about Theranos.
Yeah.
When you approached customers while in stealth mode and try to tell them about your vision and your business, well, first of all, how many, is that it?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
You want to see it?
Oh, yeah. Can I see? Okay, so this is the amount of blood that's needed to draw to do a test on whatever I have, and probably those are legion. But we'll see you later. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So again, you're in stealth mode. You're trying to sign up all these customers. How do you get them to sort of commit with sight unseen to a technology that ostensibly y'all are still developing?
Well, it's at a point now in which it's directly available to people as an alternative to having big needles stuck in their arm. And the approach we took was to have people try it out, use it, see how it performs, and if it performed well, then work with us. And a lot of our work was for pharmaceutical companies. There aren't that many pharmaceutical companies, so as we built those relationships, we had the opportunity to deploy our systems and continue to build our infrastructure to get to this point.
Now, you've raised $400 million. You have a $9 billion valuation. How much revenue are y'all generating, or did you start generating as that money was coming in? When did first cash come in, and where are you now in terms of profitability versus, sort of a need for additional capital to grow?
Sure. So we've been growing from cash from operations for some time. We first started generating cash from operations through our work for pharmaceutical companies a year or two after I started the company, and that's really been the platform on which we've built the business. I tried early to get away from what I call the equity umbilical cord, where you don't really have a business until you're generating revenue, and so that's been the primary foundation for growth. But we're a private company, so we haven't disclosed what our revenues are.
Well, you can talk a little bit about them. You can give me a ballpark on a $9 billion valuation.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get back to that. So many companies have tilted at this windmill of driving down the cost of testing and making it more accessible. How have y'all managed to do it? What is it about the process? So my blood is just drawn. Let's say that I want to get tested for a panoply of different ailments that I may think I have because I, am paranoid about all of that stuff. What happens next in the process? So
Sure.
Can you walk me through what my blood would go through as it gets tested in y'all's labs?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've redeveloped the laboratory infrastructure from end to end to be able to make this possible. And one element of it is the tiny sample. Another element of it is the cost. The infrastructure that we've built, we've now begun opening what we call our wellness centers, which are our locations that are located inside Walgreens pharmacies. And we've announced our national partnership with Walgreens in the context of our expansion across the U.S. When someone comes into our wellness center, we will scan their insurance card and their identification, and we've built an electronic infrastructure to do real-time eligibility for lab on the front end, so that when you come in, you know how much that test is going to cost you and what your deductible is.
How much is a typical test? Like for a normal sort of array of blood work, how much would that cost all in for somebody to do now?
Sure.
From y'all's labs?
Yeah, so when we announced our infrastructure last year, we began pricing our tests at 50% off of Medicare reimbursement thresholds to just exactly change the cost curve in terms of testing costs. And since then, we've begun to further reduce the rates at which we make those tests available, all the way down to, in many cases, 90% off of Medicare reimbursement rates. So a typical
90% off medical reimbursement rates.
Yeah.
What does that mean for someone who, in a minimum wage job, or someone who might not have insurance or might have the bare minimum of insurance?
Right. It means that you could get a test like a SED rate done for $1.99.
$1.99. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
And that's now.
That's today.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think that's a technical term for what y'all are doing. It's pretty cool. When you started off with this vision, well, actually, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. So that's the insurance component of it and the pricing component of it. On the back end with the lab,
Sure.
what's happening to this minuscule amount of blood that y'all are testing that is enabling you to come up with a full range of results?
Sure, exactly. So from the time you're in the wellness center, once the price points have been identified for someone so that they know, even if they have a deductible, how much it's going to cost them, and they can decide up front whether they want to purchase that service as opposed to getting a bill in the mail, 3 months later for some unknown amount. The little nanotainer that you saw has a barcode on it which tracks the sample, and when the samples get to our labs, what we've done is redevelop all of the chemistry associated with running these tests on traditional platforms to make it possible to run any laboratory test from a tiny droplet of blood. And so what will happen to that sample is it will be run through those chemistries, and we've also built out novel analytical systems on which to run the chemistries, because traditional instrumentation requires much larger tubes of blood. And then that data will be electronically sent to the ordering physician and integrated into their EMR systems, for example, electronically.
When we spoke, you mentioned that you'd done some work with the military on this. What are the applications there, and how do you see sort of the business expanding beyond sort of wellness centers at a Walgreens? Because I don't think that's the end goal for y'all.
Sure. Well, there's a huge opportunity in the context of decentralizing the testing infrastructure to be able to make comprehensive laboratory information, and laboratory information is important because it drives 70 to 80% of clinical decisions accessible at the time it matters. So in the trauma context, for example, the ability to get close to real-time data in the context of being able to stabilize someone in field, for example, can make a difference in terms of lives saved, and that's something that we're very inspired by. Equally, in the context of rural or remote areas where there is no centralized laboratory infrastructure, the ability to put in place a decentralized infrastructure, leapfrogging over the lack of conventional infrastructure, similarly to what cell phones did to landlines in China, is significant, because if you can put the decentralized laboratory testing infrastructure in place, you can then lay the foundation for decentralized care delivery, because you have the information you need, and that...
So you layer sort of a remote healthcare, consultations on top of a remote testing, and you have an ability to provide rudimentary healthcare globally to anyone who needs it. That's the
Exactly.
And do you want to own that other piece as well, that sort of remote healthcare consultation piece and that communications aspect of the infrastructure, testing infrastructure as well?
I mean, we've built in a great deal of software around this infrastructure. We were talking before this about one of our favorite quotes: "Software will eat the world," and so the communications piece is there. We're a laboratory company, so what we do is generate the laboratory data and make it accessible in the time and place it matters. But there's certainly the opportunity to link into care delivery systems.
Have you talked to some of the folks that are doing remote care now? And by the way, Mark, we're going to give you 5 cents now every time someone says software is eating the world, and Dreesen just is going to get a cut of all of that, because that just makes sense. It's only fair. But back to what we were talking about. Have you been in conversation with some of the folks that are doing this kind of remote access, remote consultation already?
Well, we've been in contact with people who are attempting to provide care in very rural and decentralized areas and are really struggling because they don't have access to laboratory data and comprehensive laboratory data to be able to provide the kind of care that's needed, and that's going to be a really important area in the future.
Huh. Now, you have what is perhaps the most accomplished board I've ever seen. Sam Nunn, former senator. Bill Frist, former senator. A former general with the Marines. Or admiral? I don't know what they call those guys. You also have an admiral. You also have David Boies as your lawyer. Why stack the deck so much with so many people? Oh, and Kissinger is on your board. Just, throw that in there. So why do you need all these guys? What is it about the industry that makes you sort of collect civil servants of the highest caliber?
We've never thought about it as stacking the deck, quote unquote, but we do believe that technology has an incredible role to play in enabling resolution of policy issues. And in healthcare, the ability to use technology, for example, what we're doing in just pricing, right, the way that we are for Medicare and Medicaid, is saving Medicare and Medicaid hundreds of billions of dollars on an annual basis. And with the opportunity to leverage what this country does so well in terms of creativity and innovation to facilitate policy change, we have been very lucky to be able to get people who really understand what it means to be able to make a systemic change in the world and to be able to advise us as we work to do that in reducing healthcare costs and changing outcomes.
Now, you and I both spent time in China, and China's very big on 5-year plans. So when you look out at the next 5 years for Theranos, where do you see the company? What is the goal for the next 5 years? Where are y'all going to be?
The goal is access for every person, no matter how much money they have or where they live. And access for us in part means these tiny samples, because 40 to 60% of people in our country don't get tested because they're scared of needles or they can't afford it. It also means operating in the locations that are closest to where people live or where they get care. And that's both in our country as well as in other places throughout the world. And that's what we want.
So do you start selling these, the technology to people or licensing it out to set up these centers anywhere, or do you yourself man and operate centers at a low cost around the country, around the world?
Well, right now we're operating these centers inside of Walgreens in the U.S. Outside of the U.S., it'll be a different model, and it really depends on where you are. So we're looking at that sort of systematically based on which location we go first and what local infrastructure is already in place, or whether we need to actually develop that infrastructure ourselves.
Are there any other partners other than Walgreens that y'all are going to market with?
Well, we've announced our relationships with hospital systems, and that's something that's really important in the context of being able to change the inpatient process in terms of the amount of blood and transfusions associated with the amount of blood that people have to get taken in the hospital setting, but also as these hospitals increasingly become accountable care organizations, the need to save money and therefore keep people out of the hospital. And that's something we're very focused on through our retail work.
What is the biggest obstacle to the adoption of this stuff? When you think about the problems that you have scaling, what is the thing that sort of worries you the most?
Well, I think as we build our company, making sure we have the right people is what it's all about. And as we get the right people, we can make sure that the service we provide person by person is excellent. And we have an extremely long-term mindset with respect to the opportunity to realize this mission. So what we care most about is literally person by person, have we created a wonderful experience and pacing our growth around that. So people in excellence in service.
Well, I think we are actually out of time.
All right.
Ms. Holmes, I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
All right.